Hello, everyone. Hopefully you recognize me if you're an MLTer. If you're from the Wond'ry community, my name is Desiree Stoller, and I'm the Managing Director of Alumni Engagement at Management Leadership for Tomorrow, or MLT. I am reaching out to you from the Metro DC area, and I am here with the amazing Reid Hoffman and Boris Moisten. I am not going to take up too much airspace here because we have quite the conversation for you today. But if you're an MLT, you know that I care quite deeply about your hours, how precious they are, and I like to situate why we've asked you to join us today. So I'm carrying this book, which my children know I've been carrying for a while, and yes, the cover has been removed so that they don't damage it. But we wanted to bring two people together to talk about the longevity of your careers and how I need you to reorient your mindset in order to be ready for the different inflection points, the different opportunities, and yes, what you have yet to accomplish and what is this amazing life of yours. And when I thought about who we would want to bring together, it was two people who had communicated and conveyed to us a real commitment to MLT and to you. Dear Boris, who was MBA Prep 2009, so that means he finished B School around 2011. Since that time, he has served the New York City chapter as its leader. Let me just underscore that. A decade as a regional chapter leader. He was doing in-person programming multiple times a year before that was even de jour. And he kept it going during the pandemic. And now he's coming back live and in color, having the past few years started not just Black Men Talk Tech, having not just supported dozens of organizations and startups with an algorithm that better helps them understand what are the funding opportunities and how they can best secure their capital. But he's also funding you directly via, yes, appropriately background Zoom, the Relentless Venture, yes, move, Relentless Venture Partners. And so when the idea came to doing this, we said it has to be Boris because he has shown a true commitment to the community, to the pursuit of a portfolio career, and to you. When it came to Reid, I had to look this up, but you first came across my desk. Well, you came across my desk moons ago, and I decided to join LinkedIn. However, it came across my MLT desk a couple of years ago when, as partner of Greylock, he said, what are we doing to truly change the face of tech? And what are the real needs, not the challenges? All of you know that I don't believe in challenges. There are universal needs, regardless of color, that people need. And we're trying to bring people up to that level. The needs were closing the network gap. And what Reid did 2 years ago was to take a stand with John Rice, with our leadership, with his other partners at Greylock to say, we're going to invest in this community and helping to close that gap and giving all of you the social capital and the awareness and the knowledge and the support that you need to succeed. So two amazing people who we've brought together to talk to you today. I'm so grateful for them. Please listen closely. Go get the books. And Boris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Desiree. Reid, pleasure to have you here today. And yeah, I'm a big fan. I've been reading a lot. I've read all of your books. So the Startup of You, the Alliance, Masters of Scale. But for me, it started with curriculum at a venture accelerator where I had to read blitzscaling. Right. So yes, and it's curriculum now at most accelerators. And one of the things I want to do to start off is talk about a common theme that runs through all of your books, which is being vulnerable, open, and honest and transparent. And let me start by being transparent myself. So when Desiree started to talk with me about the opportunity to interview you, and she said, you have to read his book, The Startup of You. Have you read any of his books? Like, yeah, I've read Masters of Scale, I've read Blitzscaling. And I was like, but let me read this, Startup of You book. And I did. And when it was done, I was like, now I have to read The Alliance. So I went through The Alliance and I started to reflect on something. I launched my venture capital fund, Relentless Venture Partners, back in February to go after, the LP community. And, after reading your book, I started to think, man, this whole fundraising process is going to take me 18 to 24 months, That's the reality for normal guys like me, right? Raising these funds, first funds. And I called up Des and I said, Des, I just got done with the alliance, and I think I'm going to need some help here. And I'm going to be honest, it's going to take me 18 to 24 months to do something, and I'm going to need to supplement that with income. I love MLT. What can I do here? And she goes, oh my God, there's so much. And then particularly she says, it has to be impactful with where you need to be. And then I spoke to Mark, to Gucci, and we started to cobble together different ideas, and we're still talking. But that's the impact your book has had, right? Traditionally, I think like most MLTers, I'm from the Northeast, and traditionally when I'm working and you're going to get another employment opportunity, you're thinking, well, how do I stress to them that I want to be a lifer? And I think that's where I want to hand the conversation over to you, because it's the 10-year anniversary of your book, The Startup of You, and you came out with a new edition. So in your books, The Startup of You and The Alliance, you discuss this new dynamic between the employee and the employer. And like me, many MLTers work for traditional companies and are grappling with this reality of not having the ability to be a lifer. What's causing that instability?
So, and a couple of years from now, there'll probably be the 10th anniversary edition of the Alliance as well, and we'll refresh it. But there's a couple of things in what you're saying, and I think, by the way, being being open, personal is awesome. I will also endeavor to do that as much as I can. But start with the general kind of the frame is that industries are transforming. There's this like topple rate about which companies drop out of the S&P 500, and it's all-time highs of companies that were really important 1, 2, 3 decades ago are gone now. Think about, or certainly not in the top set. I mean, think about how central 20 years ago Yahoo was to the internet, and it's still around, but like no one talks about it when they're talking about what's going on the internet, just as an instance, even though it's, still kind of got large properties that a lot of people use and all the rest. And that's the transformation, which means that if the industries are transforming, the companies are transforming, there isn't like a stable, I go work at, Ford or IBM or whatever, and I just do the whole thing. And that the whole landscape is in rapid evolution. And so you need to take that as a reality in your own career and what you're doing. Now, in an alliance conversation, there's two things there. One is we exhort the people who are the managers, who are the hiring people in the corporations to start the alliance conversation, to say, hey, let's be open about the fact that there's a high likelihood that you're going to go and get jobs in other places. And we should be open and building trust and know that that's a possibility in the future. So we should initiate the conversation, not necessarily employees, because the employees initiating it seems like, well, I don't really care about your company. I don't really care about this job. And so you need to do that. So that's one part of the alliance. The other part of it is that even as an employee, when you have tours of duty as the alliance and you say, hey, I'm going to work here for 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, and try to do something amazing for the company and hopefully something amazing for my career, in these two things together, that's a important thing. But by the way, I'm open to another tour of duty at the company. So it's like, as opposed to I'm showing up, like, for example, when I went to go work for Fujitsu Software Corporation, after Apple, to learn product management, I didn't show up saying, oh, by the way, I'm only going to be here for 2 years and then I'm out of here. Because, like working at a Japanese subsidiary in the US really isn't in my plans. I thought that was likely, but it was like, that wasn't the conversation I had. The conversation I had was, look, I know that you guys are giving me the opportunity to become a product manager, which frankly, no one, hasn't happened before. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And I'm going to just do great work for you. And we'll see what the future brings. Right. But I'm going to do this intense thing for a couple of years and really do great work. And then we'll see what happens. And then, of course, I sat down with the person who was the Japanese head of Fujitsu Software. And he's like, we really want you to stay here and build your career. And I said, well, look, I'm always happy to be helpful, but actually, in fact, I want to go start companies. That's actually the thing I really want to do. And so let's stay friends and friendly, but I'm going to go do this other thing. And I think that conversation is never had with the door is closed, but is the how do I do magnificent work for the company and make as much progress as possible and do amazing things here, is always the lens you should start with from an employee perspective. And sometimes employers can only hear that in, well, you're thinking about being here lifetime, and it's fine. It's
right.
possible, right? And you can leave the door open to the possibility, even though actually, in fact, if you look at LinkedIn data or anything else, we all, like the modern careers, even in Japan, are mostly going from one company to another.
Yep. Perfect. And all right, so some parts of the conversation may sound alien to our community. Could you just drill down on this term, tours of duty?
So, and we were trying to figure out something that would like have language that already works. So obviously we're paralleling this from decades of military. And the reason is because part of the military has leadership and growth, and so forth, kind of has, the person does a tour of duty here. It doesn't necessarily have to be Afghanistan. It could be a tour of duty in the cyber unit, could be a tour of duty in the naval unit, like as kinds of things we're doing. And the idea is it's both helping the organization and helping the individual jointly. And we call it transformational because we wanted to help transform the organization, transform the individual. And generally speaking, it's it's expected in a healthy thing to be a range time, not necessarily infinite. It has goals for the company, the organization, goals for the individual. It has a progression anticipation by which you're doing amazing things. And it should be, as per my earlier thing, driven by the manager who's saying, hey, let's define the work project that you're going to be really doing and making a big difference in, and let's define that so that you're working really well and coherently to help the organization. And by the way, we all understand how that's going to help your career as well. And that's what a tour of duty is considered to be.
Excellent. So here's the elephant in the room. How applicable is this framework for people of color? This framework of doing a tour of duty, and is this something that's I think this sort of, it's probably happened everywhere, but in terms of where it's probably taken off the most was in Silicon Valley, right? Is this something for the privileged few, or should people of color feel comfortable with this framework as well?
So, I think it'll eventually also play to the various, for people of color. I do think it's the way the world is generally changing, and I see an early lens from it in Silicon Valley and the tech industry, but I think it will go across everything. Obviously, part of the question within the dynamics is, frequently, in communities of color, it's like, well, actually, in fact, like I'm the big breadwinner. I went to college. I got this really good job. It's really important to me to hold on to that job because what's really important is I'm supporting my family and my and friends and helping everyone come into these industries with me and so forth. And so stability really, really matters, right? Yeah. And I understand that, and it's super important. And this should be all of us, not just the people of color doing this, but everyone should be helping with this. And it's part of the reason why, in addition to MLT, I also do opportunity work and a bunch of other things to help with this channel. And so there is probably legitimately a little bit more caution in let's be cautious about holding on to this to make sure that we're making progress, which is rational and smart. You can still use the tour of duty kind of language where you go, as opposed to saying, hey, maybe I'm going to other companies. It's, hey, what's the stuff that I could really achieve that would be really magical within the company? That's an expression of love and dedication. And when we do that, where does that next lead me within the company? How is that making progress in my career? And you can tune down a little bit for safety purposes. Hey, well, maybe I'm going to a different company, right? And you can make it entirely within the discourse, because I do think it's very important that we continue to make progress and we don't allow, as much risk here. And I can get the extra caution about risk taking, which is rational and smart.
Yeah. And I think one good example, when you pointed to a person of color. In Masters of Scale, you talked about Tristan Walker and really liking how he sort of developed his portfolio, right, professionally, like an entrepreneur, but he did it in corporate America, right?
Exactly.
So that was amazing. So for those of you who want to see a good example, because I know this question has come up a lot around, is this right for people of color? You may want to take a look at Masters of Scale as well to hear the story of Tristan Walker. And then you brought up, and what you just touched on was this potential of risk, right? So how do we manage potential downside risk when taking proactive career risks? And I think you introduced the framework there, ABZ, right?
Yep. So all the Startup You, the book is the advice I give entrepreneurs doing their companies, but refactored for individuals, to be the entrepreneur of your own life. And part of it that you have to do as an entrepreneur is, like people say, well, it's risk taking, yes, but it's smart risk taking and it's risk management, right? The question is, taking a risk could lead to something extraordinary in your career and opportunity. It could be the breakout opportunity that we talk about. It could be the thing that suddenly is you're in the tech industry, you're at a really hot startup, you're at, you've got a new kind of job that actually, in fact, gives you a bunch of economic and career opportunity for it. And risk taking can frequently be a pretty instrumental way of doing that. Right. Now, the question is, how do you take risk smartly? And so part of what entrepreneurs do, I have a plan A. Now, one of the mistakes is frequently, and you see all this talked about, what's your plan B? It's like plan B sounds like it's like, oh, well, it's not plan A. It's now over here. It's plan B. And you're like, no. Have plans B, which are like, as we're trying to do A, maybe X won't go right, so I'll do this, and that'll be a plan B. Or maybe the goal, as opposed to goal A, it'll be goal A prime, and plan B prime can be getting me over to how do I get to A prime as a way of doing it. It's like, well, I think maybe I'm going to have my career in data science, but actually it's not really working out that well here, but maybe I could go do this artificial intelligence stuff, or maybe I can go into finance with it. And that could be a kind of a different goal as terms of what I'm doing. And then the macro risk thing, the thing that allows, when you're lucky, to take big risks, is you can have a plan Z. And so I was very lucky that my, dad was a successful lawyer. So when I went into entrepreneurship, I called him and I said, hey, look, I'm going to go start a company. I'm going to go into debt. I'm going to work through all my savings. If it doesn't work, I'm going to have to get another job in the tech industry. And can I use your spare bedroom while I'm doing that? And I was lucky enough that I had a dad who could do that. And he said, yep, sure, that's fine. And plan Zs can be different, but it's like, what allows you to take a risk is what's your fallback plan, your reset to setting to another plan A. And if you have that kind of set there, you're monitoring when you'll need to trigger it. And so that allows you to take potentially more risk. And taking smart risk is part of how, like, entrepreneurs succeed in really strong ways. Venture capitalists, as relentless ventures, succeed in really strong ways, but also individuals in their careers. Like, for example, can I take a risk and join the startup company? Okay, what's my plan Z if the startup doesn't work? And knowing what that is, have thought about it a little bit, have your friends, your team, life is a team sport, helping you with it, can help you navigate that. That's ABZ planning. Sorry, long answer, but
no, that
the full
was
thing.
Great. And you started to touch on the next topic, which is leaning into your network, right? Let's sort of build a question around that. How do we use your network to improve our position? Like what's the value that we could extract out of our network? And how can we create these mutually accelerating relationships?
So one thing is life's a team sport. So your network is what helps you. And it isn't just, your brother or your closest roommate from college. There's a variety of people that you meet both at work and outside of work, where there's respect and trust and where you guys, the people like each other.
Right.
And so that's the fullness of your network. And so part of the thing is to always to be staying active with your network, helping them in small ways that could be really big for them, asking for things in terms of, hey, what do you see what's going on in the industry? What do you see what's going on with technology? What do you see what's going on with opportunities and so forth? Because then it becomes a sensors, because sometimes it's like, like, for example, when I got back from, I decided not to be an academic, got back from Oxford, went to back to Stanford, and I was like, well, I gotta get in the software industry, and I made a mistake of sorts, prioritization mistake, which is I went to the career centers and I read all these job descriptions, and I, started kind of trying to line up things and apply for things. Right. And actually, how I ended up with a job at Apple is I started calling my friends of mine, and one of them said, well, my freshman roommate is working at Apple, and they're kind of innovative, and that's kind of the space you're talking about. Why don't you call him? And they said, he's like, oh, okay, you don't have a perfect resume for this, but we could start you as a contractor. And if you're willing to start as a contractor, we could start. And that's what kicked off my career. And so a network is extremely important, and it's kept alive by talking, helping, collaborating, going out to lunch, going out to coffee. And then when you meet someone new and interesting, just say, hey, could we grab coffee and talk about the industry? Not could we talk about what jobs you have for me? Because, that sounds like work, like difficulty. But just, hey, we'll talk about the industry. We'll talk about what's going on. I'll tell you some of the things that I think is really interesting. Anyway, so that's the network side of it.
And just to top this off, because we do want to talk about, you're the network intelligence man, so guru. So to hear your thoughts on why LinkedIn, I'm sure some people here would like to hear that. But before we get into that, what makes your view of self-leadership unique? What differentiates your view or the frameworks that you're using from most other self-leadership techniques?
Well, so I think and this is, I think, the effort with a startup view is to say that the way you need to think about yourself is like as an entrepreneurial business, and the tool sets that entrepreneurs bring. It could be the network of relationships, because entrepreneurship's always a team sport. Even though we tell these stories as solo founders, it could be risk management and taking. It could be identifying where the world is moving towards and try to move there early and take advantage of the fact that you've made that recognition, possibly through your network and other kinds of things. Yeah. How you can try to get into a growth path and a compounding path through these entrepreneurial techniques. And I think that's the big difference. Too often, I think most career advice is about like inventorying just your skills that you have now and what the job matchup is, or saying discover your passion, or like be true to your passion, which you have to be true to your identity and your passion, but you have to be navigating the changing, volatile world around you. And I think that's the thing I think we, kind of like, Ben and I and bring to, here's a lens that could be super important to you in a growing way as you navigate this volatile future.
Right. And I think a question that rolls out of that is, how do you know when it's the right time to bet on yourself and to start your own venture versus, to keep your 9 to 5?
So, to some degree, it's kind of a question. Starting your own venture is always a very high risk factor. You should anticipate that the majority of these fail, and they don't fail because other people are insufficiently prepared or incompetent or else. The fact that it's a difficult thing. You don't know what's happening with competition. You can't fully predict what's happening with the market. Entrepreneurs are people who build plans that outstrip their current resources, and can you go get those resources, whether it's funding or people to join you or other kinds of things, is always a kind of challenging thing. So you have to be ready for that jump off the cliff. That's one thing. That's what your personal life, your risk, your ability to totally focus on it, your ability to do to go through when I started my first company, one of my friends wrote me a one-line email, said, "Welcome to where 15 minutes is the difference between exultation and terror." And it's like, I'm going to rule the world. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Right. 15-minute gap. And so,
and this was Social Net?
Yes, that was Social Net. Exactly. Right. And so you have to have that. And then the next thing is that you have an idea. Well, you should go to the smartest people anyone who will talk to you, not necessarily experts, and go, what's wrong with this idea? Right? Not do you like the idea? Because then people say, oh, okay, they're looking for sure, have confidence. I believe in you. Of course I do, because I'm here. I'm your friend. No. What's wrong with it? What would go wrong? Right? And then be indexing that and think, do you have a theory of the game about why the smartest people you know think something could go wrong while you think it could go right. And you have a good theory of that game.
Right.
If you have that, and then that could be the time to start this idea, right? Like, for example, when I was going around with LinkedIn and asking people this, what everyone said is, well, it's a network property. So first person, no value. Second person, no value. Third person, no value. It's never going to grow. There's never going to be any people. Because why invite anyone? Because there's no value. Because there's no network. Yeah, right. You have the cold start problem on the network. And I was like, but I know how to solve that problem, and so I get it. Totally smart, legitimate critique. But this means that it's a good idea for me to go do this because I have a theory of how to solve that problem.
Right. And yeah, for you had people with some influential networking capabilities. And could you, and let's continue to focus on you and some of the inflection moments in your life. Can you speak to key inflection moments in your career when you had to decide if you were going to quit a venture or continue, and how you made the decision in face of significant sunk cost? Right. Yeah. So maybe, you touch on working on social net and I'm sure you worked on other projects for other, companies. Is there a time when, you said, well, maybe it's time to move on from this?
Well, so one, I already mentioned Fujitsu Software, which was, they're like, we're going to promote you, make you a head of the group, all the rest. You can be an executive, And I was like, no. Actually, in fact, I'm going to go try to raise money. Never had done it before. Probably going to fail. Took months trying to raise the money for SocialNet. I was a baby entrepreneur. I didn't understand what is well-conceived business ideas and what is not. We had no go-to-market plan. It was terrible. Literally the number of things that I would go tell my younger self of, oh my God, you're steering into the landmine to blow up the vehicle you're driving. Right. But I was like, no, I need to get doing that. I need to learn it. And part of it was a theory of capital's available to me now, so I should try it, because it was 97 and the internet was kind of just beginning to go, like, oh my God, this is where internet stuff really matters. Yeah. And so I could go do that. That was one. Another one was, okay, SocialNet, I have made all these failure points. It's totally failing. And it has to be restarted. Helped hire a CEO, helped get new financing. But then I was like, look, I now understand how to do this. So I'm going to go start another company. And then, Peter Thiel, I was on the board of PayPal, said, no, don't start another company, join us. And I was like, well, but I had some ideas of companies I want to start. And he's like, no, his pitch turned out to be 3 years and a great 3 years. But it was like, no, with this, we're going to sell the company within a year. And this will be a great interim for you. It was like, okay, great, I'll try that. And then, of course, it was a wild ride of intense learning and building network. Yeah. And the soft assets are a really key part of it. So almost each transition involved taking a smart risk, of giving up on something that I was already planning on to go do that. And so, because recognition of where does really interesting opportunity intersect and readjusting to the opportunity that you found through the path that you're walking is really key, versus a chess game of no, I have this grand end plan that I just have to stay on track of, is usually unwise. And by the way, most entrepreneurial companies don't work that way. They're like, PayPal started with, we're an encryption technology for mobile platforms. Like, well, that has almost nothing to do with. Yes, exactly.
Right. Well, so let's talk about one of your big goals. Reading a lot of your books, listening to a lot of your interviews, listening to the commencement speech at Vanderbilt, friendship and network, honesty, truthfulness, being introspective and willing to hear feedback from people, very important to you. And so is this, the network. Could you, everyone wants to know, and you probably answered this in different ways, why LinkedIn? What problem were you trying to solve? And then two, here's the second, but both some of the people here asked, and my LinkedIn family, they're all commenting, sending questions now. This is coming up. Has sort of LinkedIn lived up to your expectations and done everything you expected? So why LinkedIn, and, has it lived up to your expectations?
So obviously I've been enormously grateful, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's really worked out very well with LinkedIn. And the thought with LinkedIn was this notion that life and work is a team sport, and how do we help each other, and what's the most lightweight tool by which we can help each other navigate the world, right? The world of life, the world of work in this particular case. And it was like, well, actually, in fact, if you had a list of people that you're connected to, that, part of the semantics of a LinkedIn connection is who would you introduce on a case-by-case basis to other people with a kind of some referential trust and information. And so part of, for example, when I offer to connect with someone on LinkedIn, what I'm doing is not saying I want your network. I'm saying, look, I'm offering you to connect to my network potentially.
Right.
So because part of how it works is when you're thinking about something, and obviously when you think about hiring somebody, but when you're thinking about expertise, or who should I talk to about this, or who might know something about this, or who might I ask about this business opportunity or pursue a business opportunity with, you've got this rich database of skills and talents and capabilities and companies that with also a network overlay of who could you reach on a trusted basis. That's essentially the idea behind LinkedIn. That was the creation that I wanted to do. And so the problem that I was trying to solve was to enable people to approach their life as a team sport in a much more, kind of robust way with kind of lightweight needs for engagement. Because, like, for example, you can like sign up for LinkedIn, set a profile, get connected, and say, well, I'm not really actively using it right now, but I'm helping my friends. I'm helping the people I'm connected to.
Right.
And then when you go, oh, I now have a problem I need to solve. I need to hire someone, find a job, sell something, find expertise, that kind of, then LinkedIn becomes the platform for that. And I think LinkedIn has done a great job of that. Now, that being said, like, I'm still looking for certain tell points for, has LinkedIn got to its, to even call it, a third of its opportunity. One of them is what makes you most happy and most successful as an employee is finding a great manager. So one of the things that LinkedIn allows you to do is to reference check a prospective manager, right? Like, should I go work for this person? Right. It's a great question, which previously was totally unsolvable, right? Like, an individual doesn't have the resources. LinkedIn can make it possible, by which you can say, hey, let me see if I can find some other people who've worked at that company who can tell me if this person's a really good manager to be working for. Because what's most predictive for your success and happiness and growth is having a really great relationship with your manager. And that's like an important thing that people just don't ask. And that's an example of something where of many, many things where LinkedIn enables you. And I literally have had nobody come and tell me that they've done that with LinkedIn yet. We're 19 years on.
No, but that's a great opportunity. Yeah, I think your manager can definitely make or break the career, right, irrespective of your ability. The other interesting point that you discussed with the use of LinkedIn was as a competitor, launching a company, wanting to understand what the competitor is doing, and maybe a leading consulting company doesn't have the pricing information and their execution. But if you tell your whole staff, go out to your LinkedIn community and ask everyone, what are they pricing and how are they servicing, you're going to get some data back. So that was also an interesting use case.
100%.
Yeah. So I'm trying to collate through all these questions and keep it in line with what we've been talking about. And I think, the natural flow now is along the lines of what's next for Reid Hoffman. And the question that frequently goes along with that is, what is inflection AI?
So artificial intelligence is having a huge renaissance right now, mostly through these things called large language models, foundational models, which is, trained for a model that's like 200, 500 billion parameters on the internet, and then make things interesting happen out of it. And I've been doing this in a variety of contexts on the OpenAI board, at Greylock at Microsoft. We in addition to co-founding Inflection, we've also done Adept at Greylock, and there's going to be all of this amazing stuff. And part of, what I'd been really approaching it from a Greylock investment point of view. And so Mustafa Suleyman, who's the co-founder of DeepMind, and he and I were working on an idea that he's not yet revealed to the general world, so I can't really speak to the world, to the idea. But when we were working through it, I said, okay, well, Greylock will lead your financing, I'll be a member of your board, et cetera. And he said, well, actually, in fact, what I'd really love is for you to spend a day a week working with me on this, because the things that you're bringing are very different than all this amazing, kind of deep learning tech he has been working on, and that would be a great, kind of, put peanut butter and chocolate together, as a kind of a way of making this work. And I said, oh, this could be super important to the world. I think we're going to see transformation of all industries from AI technology. I think that because you've had all this experience with DeepMind and Google, you understand where the startup opportunity is, and we're going to go do that. And that was just, it's how do you make the world a much better place than when you found it, is part of kind of the meaning of life generally, including the meaning of work. And I was like, this could be really it. So that's one of the things. Now I continue to be a tech investor with Greylock, and I continue to try to work on the various things that I think are important to society, everything from politics to various forms of philanthropy. But it's that at broad range, you add in some content like start a review in the book. That's the portfolio, which is, from the outside looks a little crazy, but we seem to make it work sometimes.
Yeah, I'd love to be a founder that could, change Reid Hoffman's decision from being an investor to being a co-founder with me. Talk about finding resources. So let's talk about being an investor, though. So I think, and you have tons of questions here as well. As an investor, what's the most important thing that you want to hear from a company leader that'll really make you want to invest in that company or leader?
So one of the good news about seeking investment is that you don't need to get a yes for any one particular VC or any one particular thing. You need to get a yes from one of them, not from everyone. And there's different patterns. So the two patterns that I most often track in venture investing is, call it reliable venture investing, which is, things where it could be like enterprise software or e-commerce, or things where you go, okay, I've got a pretty good understanding. I can be very professional about this. I know what go-to-market looks like. I know what the market demand looks like. I know what the TAM stuff looks like. There's a whole bunch of my partners at Greylock who do investing like this, and they do it extremely well. And they, when they're listening to this, want to hear that you're on top of the expertise question, that you understand that when you're building a SaaS product, or you're building a e-commerce for X or something else, that you've got a very good understanding of the mechanics of, here's how we build the company, here's how we go to market, here's what the stages of the product look like, here's how you validate the risk, here's the kind of people you need to hire, et cetera, et cetera. And so you show mastery and expertise in this. And by the way, some of that is the network you've assembled, people you've gotten to invest, the progress you've made, et cetera. Now, for me, which is different than that, I tend to look at, is this a smart risk that could change the world? So like, for example, when I brought Airbnb to Greylock, the reason why I'm at Greylock is David Z, who was the Greylock investor at LinkedIn. Super amazing VC, has not only done LinkedIn, but did Facebook and Pandora and Roblox and Discord and has done a whole set of things. He looked at me with Airbnb and he said, well, every VC has a deal they can fail on. Airbnb can be yours, right? Because he looked at this and said, this is going to break in so many different ways. Like, it doesn't have any proven traction or anything else yet. And massively to David's credit, the numbers hadn't changed in Airbnb. 6 months later, he came to me and said, I was wrong. You were right. Why did you have the calculus of doing this? Right. And I said, well, the thing I was looking at was, yeah, you're right. Hotels will hate it. We'll try to bring in local unions that hate it. Neighborhoods will be uncertain about it. Local city governments will be uncertain about it. All these different ways it can break. But if it works, it transforms the world, and it should work, because hosts get a way to make more money and to bring, to either pay their rent or pay their mortgage or whatever else, and adds their income, and they're really motivated for doing this. And travelers get not just the generic hotel experience, but something that could be more local, connected to the community, more bespoke. Like, this is the way the world should be. And they have a theory of the game on all of these different risks. And maybe the theory will bite, but they're going to play smart. And if it works, it'll be huge. So I tend to be oh my God, like, if these risks are well navigated, this could totally transform the industry, totally transform society. And I have companies that don't work, because I take a huge amount of risk in doing them. Yeah. But that's the way that I tend to look at it. So it's like, why could this be totally massive? Are you smart about the risks? Do you understand that there's real risk? And do you have a plan against them? And that tends to be the way that I look at things.
Yeah, well, your bet on Airbnb seemed to be correct. I think I heard a report the other day, correct me if I'm wrong, that their bookings finally outpaced Marriott's. Was that right? Have you heard
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
Interesting.
no longer on the board and so forth, but I've heard the same public story.
Good. Now let's talk about, there are two more things. We're running up on time, but I'm digging into the Q&A questions from the audience. How have you become a better judge of authentic and reliable character, especially as an investor?
So one thing that I really emphasize, and it isn't just because LinkedIn is built as a way to do this, it's built this way because I emphasize this, is reference checking is always much more important than an interview. You do get good things, you want both, but I always reference check on this stuff. And so, for example, part of the reason when, Brian, Nate, and Joe were presenting Airbnb to me, 3 minutes into the discussion, I said, I'm going to make an offer to invest, because I've already done reference checking on them. Right. Which is, I try to, as much as possible, do reference checking in every circumstance, because we all get this experience of presenting really well. And I, by the way, encourage people to reference check me too. Right. It's like, don't formulate your point of view based on, how I'm presenting in the room and whether or not I can be compelling about why I can be a good partner. Go call people who worked with me. Go call people who have that, and that's an important thing to do. So that's, I think, the 1, 2, and 3 of this. Now, that being said, there's ways to kind of get more legitimacy, like a little bit of like how you kick this off is say, well, if you have the opportunity to build a relationship, and the question is, right, it's like, look, what's the biggest failure you've learned from, right? And if they say, well, I learned that I was working too hard and I burned out, you're like, okay, you're not really being that necessarily honest, because you're trying to package it as a virtue, as opposed to well, when I, started SocialNet, I had no idea that go-to-market was central to the strategy of what you should be doing. I was really, really ignorant, and I learned it really brutally and really fast, right? And what lessons you take from that was like, well, I was being too arrogant in my own mind, and I should have been calling people, people who had been doing startups and saying, what is key to this game, and learning from it. I hadn't learned yet to use my network smart enough, and I should have been doing that. And that's what I would have told my younger self, right? If I was trying to do that. And that kind of thing, by being more genuine and open about it, go, oh, all right, the person will be disclosive. The person will partner with me. The person will be, like, for example, when I tell entrepreneurs I'm pitching VCs, tell the VC, your prospective partner, what you see the risks to be.
Right.
Because if you don't, then either you're crazy because you don't see the risks, or you're lying because you're not being transparent about what you see the risks to be. And then you're showing that you want to be open and you want to be partners. And that's the kind of thing that I think is very important for establishing, trust and going down a road where you might actually work together for the rest of your work lives.
Right. And one big question: how do you hope to be remembered? And how should MLTers think about their legacy starting from now?
So I do think it's a very good question. Like, one of the questions I sometimes ask in an interview is, like, if you were to write your obituary, what would you want it to be?
I know they're like, when I saw that as a question, like, guys, are we really going to ask him, like, what does he when all's said and done and he's gone? They're like, man,
look, we are humans. Yeah. We are mortal. And actually, in fact, thinking about the fact, like, we like to try to ignore the fact that we're mortal, but and overly obsessing about it's bad, but thinking about we're mortal, and that there is that maybe at some point sci-fi will get us to a point where mortality is less relevant, but we're humans, and it's part of it. And you should think about, what does that mean for the meaning of your life? What does that mean for the meaning of kind of how you're doing things? And so I think that's very important. And so for me, like, I am hopeful that I will have built some enduring artifacts that the world will be better off for. LinkedIn, like, it'll help people navigate their own economic destinies, find the right kinds of projects where their gifts most make a difference for themselves, for their families and communities, for the world. that technology will be shaped in a way that it amplifies humanity and our societies, both as individuals and a collective. That some thoughts that I have on a variety of things will help the progressive zeitgeist about how we're learning, and how we're learning to be more human, better humans as we're doing it. And those are the kinds of things. And of course, in that, I also hope that, my friends and community will value, our time together. And, whenever, hopefully in the far future, I kind of shuffle off this mortal coil, people will be raising a glass of wine going, that was really awesome. I really love that thing that Reid did, or that interaction I had with him. And that's the kind of thing. And you try to live in a way that those will be much more the future.
Yeah. I went to Brandeis University and I learned about this Jewish concept called tikkun olam, which is exactly what you're talking about, which is just making the world a better place, while you're here, before you're gone. We have about 10 minutes left and we have to get Desiree back on soon, but I'd love to do some rapid fire type questions. You did this with the CEO of Goldman Sachs recently, but here are some questions that I want to get through before we lose you, because I know I'm going to get hate messages from not asking all the questions. It's going to happen. What makes a great venture capitalist?
A great venture capitalist is someone who can identify an entrepreneur who has a plan to make a huge difference in an industry and will take a risk bet for doing it, but then join and help row the boat.
There we go. What is your view on crypto and Web3? What's there to be excited about?
I think that there is a fundamental new technology for evolving the internet, for having a distributed protocol that can hold value. Value could be money, value could be certificates of ownership, value could be identity. There's a whole bunch of random garbage that's going on, but those protocols will be fundamental and will upgrade the impact the internet's having on the entire world.
What is Reid Hoffman's proudest personal accomplishment?
It's funny. I always hope that my general answer is to yet to come.
Yeah.
Because I'm hopeful that I'm building a bunch more. I mean, obviously, I think part of the thing is, LinkedIn has over 700 million people whose lives it can help as members, and I think that's a huge one.
How do you best influence others?
I think part of it is to, in every interaction, to try to, what's the thing that you can do or say that's most helpful to the person? And then what's the frame in which they can hear it in a way that's useful, and approach every interaction that way.
And this one's about, blitzscaling. How are you coaching management teams to adapt blitzscaling to the more expensive capital environment that we're in?
So blitzscaling is always about relative speed. And so obviously when capital is free flowing and you just kind of tap as much capital as possible and go inefficiently as possible for speed, that's one thing. But even when you get to much more capital tight environments like we're at,
right,
it's kind of the question of how do I may be much more careful about my capital, which by the way, broadly, you really should be. But it's kind of still like, how do I use the current moments and the challenges to still move faster than my competitors? Because that emphasis on first to scale market is what really matters in a lot of these instances. And so that's the nuance. So it's no longer like, okay, every bold idea that you can that be as inefficient as like, okay, we still have to be tight on human and financial capital. Now, how do we still focus on speed?
Right. And if you're starting a new company today, what roles will be your first key hires and why?
Well, that really depends on the company. So,
yeah,
at Inflection, it's a bunch of world-class AI and engineering experts to build a product.
Awesome. And here's one to reflect on. Do you have any regrets or missed opportunities that you'd be willing to share?
Well, if you're not making both type 1 and type 2 errors as you're going through your career and investing, you're not playing, smart and aggressively enough. So the short answer is a ton. And,
Right.
3 days later, I finished listing out all of the things that I regret. I mean, I regret, Paul and Ben brought Pinterest to me twice as an angel investor before they did their venture round, and I just didn't get it.
Right.
We talked about Etsy, like on this amazing creativity platform, which Katerina and Stuart brought to me, and I was like, there's not a big enough market for this, and clearly they were right, I was wrong.
Right.
And so there's just a stack of those kinds of things, and sometimes it's also, kind of like, like what kind of technologies do you work on? It's like, or what kinds of things do you like, people do you support? There's a very long list of all of these things, and if you're not identifying them and learning from them, then you're not learning. And so focus on learning and growing.
We have about 6 minutes left. I want to get Desiree back on, but before we do that, one of the questions we got in is, how do we make venture capital more inclusive?
Look, so I think this is everyone has to work on this problem together. It's not just obviously people from the various less advantaged communities, and so part of that is build networks, right? It's part of the reason I love MLT. Part of the reason why we at Greylock chose MLT as one of the kind of 5 or 6 efforts that we reached out to. This is, what do we do to help? Well, let's go to the places that are building really smart, talented networks and help that within kind of the tech startups, within the venture capital community, et cetera. And let's go do that. And I think building those networks will be the natural sustaining way. But obviously everybody this is one of those areas where you go, it's a clear systemic problem. And in systemic problems, you're always either part of the solution or part of the problem. And so if you're not identifying what you're working on to be part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so everybody needs to do it.
So we ended with how we started, which is networks, friendship, truths, and that's the way to tackle some of the biggest problems we're working on. Reid Hoffman, it's been a pleasure interviewing you today. Thank you. And thank you for all your hard work with MLT as well. Desiree, do you want to come back on?
Why not? Why not, Boris? First and foremost, thank you for that conversation. I loved the last few questions, because here's the thing. What you guys really touched on was the learning and the growing. And the ask that you made towards the end to the MLT, and I'll shout out the wonderful Wond'ry community, was how are you also connecting and leading? Because ultimately, all 4 of those different nodes come together for you to actually, one, have that iterative growth mindset, the ambitious approach to your life, the way that Reid is underscored here. But also, I tell people all the time, we're not here to create senior executives. We're here to create leaders of impact. And to me, there's a distinction. So please, yes.
My texts are coming in. They loved it. Okay, I got to the questions.
They did love it. They did love it. So I just want to thank you. I want to say thank you to the Wond'ry community. Yes, you just came off, Laura and Michael, for bringing this together, for being amazing hosts. I want to thank the amazing MLT team. Frankly, Reid has a powerhouse team behind him that made this come to fruition. So Aria, thank you so much. Saeed, thank you. And seriously, we recorded this. For all of you that listened, you likely should go back. There was a lot of content here. It was quite packed. So go back and rewatch it.
Hey,
Because,
and Desiree,
yes.
if I could chime in, the other
Yes.
thing is, in some of these questions, even when I saw them coming in before I was able to speak to Reid, I felt as if I knew the framework that he was going to use to answer the question, or just his philosophy, right, to tackling this. So if you want to get to understand Reid better in his perspective on life and what we should do, take the opportunity to check out his books and to read them. 10-year anniversary for Startup Review. The Alliance is the different side of the same coin for that book. Masters of Scale, amazing stories. And the reason why I read Masters of Scale, I reread it, was because someone said, if you're going to interview someone, Masters of Scale is like the go-to thing for understanding how you should interview people. And I'm like, I'm going to be interviewing Reid Hoffman. Let me reread that book. And blitz scaling, right? You know, like most companies that die out there die at the bottom of the J curve, right? Because they haven't even got their product out to market. Yes. Right? And blitz scale will tell you how to get the product out there, how to get feedback from your early adopters, and then how to take it to the next level, right? So, and then you'll see how everything is intertwined. So if you want to understand it better, read his books.
Yes. Don't go the shortcut route. Read the whole book. Reid, thank you so much for the hour. It was fantastic. So grateful. Thank you.
The work you guys do is super important. Always a delight. And I count myself a small ally in the work that you're doing, and I look forward to doing more of these.
Thank you.
Feeling is mutual. To everyone, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Ciao.
Thank you, everyone, so much for attending.